Let's talk for a few minutes about the Indigenous Voice to Parliament. You wrote an op-ed piece for The Australian just recently, and it caused quite a stir, and now you've got a whole bunch of people considering you an enemy. Martyn, what are your thoughts about The Voice and how that is a concern, and where would a Christian position be on that?
Yeah, look, first of all, I just want to make the point that when it comes to the Indigenous voice, I appreciate the intentions of those who support it. And so I'm not against those intentions. I too want the best for our Indigenous brothers and sisters and Indigenous Australians, and I want to see the circumstances in those communities markedly improved. I just don't think this is the way to do it. I think this is the wrong answer to a very real issue. And for those who are sort of not yet in the picture, what this is it's a plan to change our constitution, the Australian Constitution, and to add into it another body. So we already have in the Constitution a Senate, a House of Representatives, a High Court, things like this. They want to add in another one, and they call it the Indigenous Voice to Parliament. And it's completely different from anything else there because it's actually a race-based institution. The real qualification to get into that institution, to be part of it, is your race. So straight away, my antenna goes up and I say, well, there's wisdom in the fact that one of the distinctions that is expressly obliterated in the kingdom of God is race. And so if we're building earthly kingdoms with these sort of redeemable segregations in them, then we're going to run into trouble. And I think that that's true, and history proves that that's true. But of course, the idea is they're saying, well, we need to come up with ways to close the gap. And there is a gap. And nobody is happy about the fact that there's a gap. And we all want that to change. We want to improve the situation for Indigenous communities. But here's an interesting observation, Neil. The one place where the gap is not evident is actually politics. There's 11 parliamentarians without any Indigenous voice to Parliament. It's just happening naturally. There's 11 parliamentarians who have Indigenous identity. There is a Minister for Indigenous Australians who sits around what they call the cabinet table, where every high-level government decision is made, and they represent Indigenous Australians in every decision. There's a multi-billion-dollar department for Indigenous Australians. It's got a whole office block in Canberra. I've seen it. It's got tens of billions to spend across the country, and it's doing that. Then there's all these consulting bodies which come in and consult on all the legislation that is put before the Parliament. It's always got Indigenous input on that legislation. It's always formal. It's always incorporated. There is no gap in the political world. And yet the gap, as we think of it, which is the disadvantage in the real world, it persists. And I'm sitting here saying, guys, politics isn't the answer. If what you're doing isn't working, maybe doing more of it is not the solution. Adding politics and politics and politics and more institutions and more bodies and more dollars, that's not going to solve the problem. The solutions are actually very practical. They're probably best led by charities and non-government organisations who spend money better, are less prone to corruption, and have a heart for the work that they're doing rather than just targets and dollars. There's better ways to achieve this in a way that does not irredeemably segregate the country by race. I also happen to know that it's driven by politics in the sense that it won't actually be a body that's just about skin colour. It'll be a body that's about people of a certain skin colour with a certain political view. It's probably going to become more of a woke voice to Parliament than an Indigenous voice to Parliament. That's just the way these things go. You can think of like the Human Rights Commission. They're not so much about human rights, they're more about woke politics. That's how government bodies go. So those are my concerns with this. I think that there is an institution already that governs for all Australians called the Parliament. I think that it's not very well suited to solving some of these disadvantages, and especially as the church, I think we can start thinking about, well, what are some on-the-ground practical answers to provide the help and support that these communities need? That's the real issue, and I happen to know that because I've spent some time actually staying out in Indigenous communities in remote parts of Australia. I talked to the elders. I found out an awful lot. I've had a lot to do with Indigenous people for many years, and they always bring to me the practical problems of the community. They say, we need to solve this, we need to fix that, we need to build this thing over here. And I think to myself, well, if only we got some on-the-ground support. The Indigenous voice, I think, is a very dangerous path to go down because of that racial segregation issue within the government. It's the wrong call And certainly if it comes up as a referendum next year, I won't be voting for it.